Mass Effect offers a fairly deep and unique experience. The series as a whole has solid gameplay, intriguing character interactions, and an immense universe. With that said, those aspects don't build off of each other as well as they could. See, there's a clear distinction between combat sections and role-playing sections. The typical flow of the game is Commander Shepard talks about doing a thing, then does said thing, and follows that with talking about what happened while doing the thing. Role-playing might be placed in the middle of a combat section, or vice versa, but they still feel like two different phases of the game. This isn't inherently bad. It'd be pretty unwieldy to focus on picking dialogue options while charging at enemies head-on. The issue stems from the two sections having very little to do with each other in terms of rewards and consequences. A choice made through role-playing might affect combat by determining the enemies you face or if an NPC helps you in a battle, but these consequences really don't have much weight to them. The actual consequence of a choice is almost always addressed in later role-playing sections. On the other side of things, the choices made in combat pretty much never have an impact on role-playing. In a series that is supposed to be based around choice and consequence, it stands to reason that the things that happen in and out of battle should have a direct relationship to one another. This is where I think the next Mass Effect entry could learn something from the indie roguelike game Darkest Dungeon. Darkest Dungeon is centered around the affliction system. Essentially, every time you bring a party into a dungeon, characters can take two different types of damage, physical and mental. If characters take too much physical damage, they die permanently, and if they take too much mental damage, they typically become afflicted with a negative trait. Characters gain stress from various things like not eating enough food, having low torchlight, falling into a trap, or being hit by certain enemy attacks. When a character has an affliction, he or she might decide to not attack for a round or refuse to use any healing items. The afflicted character will also cause the stress levels of the rest of the party to go up because of his or her bad attitude. All in all, having an afflicted party member is no good. Adversely, a character can have a heroic response to the stress bar being filled up, which provides a bonus that buffs the character and helps reduce the party's stress levels. Along with afflictions and heroics, party members can also develop positive and negative quirks. Quirks raise and lower stats and also dictate what characters can and can't do. While exploring, quirks are developed from interacting with objects, battling enemies, or retreating from a dungeon. For example, if a rabid dog bites one of your characters, he might contract rabies, which raises attack but lowers accuracy. This entire system makes you constantly make decisions about the well-being of your party. Do you open a treasure and risk it being trapped? Do you continue into an unexplored room when your party is teetering on the brink of insanity? It makes every decision have weight to it, and it doesn't stop there. These decisions carry over to the other parts of the game. Like Mass Effect, Darkest Dungeon also has two distinct phases. Once your party returns from questing, you spend time recuperating in town. Here, characters' health gets regenerated automatically, but their stress levels do not. To lower a character's stress, you have to send him or her to get treated at various establishments in town. Treatments lower stress significantly, but when characters are being treated, they have to sit out of the next quest. Doing this also costs gold and runs the risk of giving your characters more quirks. Like if you send a character to the brothel, she might contract syphilis and take a stat penalty. Or if you send a character to gamble, he could get caught cheating and not be allowed to gamble in town in the future. This is where the combat phase and role-playing phase really start to overlap. It gets even deeper when you take into consideration how the game handles resource management. Along with paying for stress-reducing treatments, gold can also be used to have quirks removed, buy items to use in dungeons, and upgrade armor, weapons, and attacks. However, gold is not an overly abundant resource, so spending it on one thing usually means that you won't have enough to spend it on another. You also collect heirlooms while adventuring, which can be used to permanently upgrade the various buildings in town. Again, like gold, when you use them to upgrade one thing, you probably won't have enough to upgrade another. All of this creates a huge set of difficult questions to consider when in and out of a dungeon. And that's because the two phases work in tandem. Quirks that you get in combat affect actions when in town and vice versa. They're clearly different phases, but they need each other to exist. While in Mass Effect, combat and role-playing could almost be two different games. But if they implemented a system like Darkest Dungeon, the relationship between the two phases would work together instead of as two separate entities. The characters in your squad could each have a stress bar, and also develop quirks as various things happen during missions and conversations. For instance, if one of your squad mates gets tackled and punched in the face by a Krogan on a mission, then maybe she would become afraid of Krogan and do less damage when fighting against them. In turn, this would cause her to become distrustful of the Krogan member in your squad, which might lead to problems in the future. Or maybe something you say while role-playing would distress a character in the party and make him feel hopeless, like it isn't worthwhile to fight. This might make him move slower and lag behind while on missions, and be erratic during conversations. When these issues arise, you'd have to figure out different ways for characters to reduce stress and eliminate negative quirks. Maybe you'd be able to talk a squad member down if you had high enough charisma, or maybe they just need to get a solid kill on the battlefield to work their confidence back up. But in some cases, the easiest solution might be throwing money at the problem. Working to keep your team members from becoming afflicted would be vital. Leaving a squad mate's affliction untreated for long enough could lead to the character abandoning or betraying the team, getting killed, or overusing valuable resources. All of this would also give a solid incentive to use more characters on your team. While playing the Mass Effect trilogy, I pretty much always chose the characters I thought were the coolest to join me on missions. The only time I really used other characters was in Mass Effect 2 to do all the loyalty missions. In general, Shepard does most of the work in a fight, so I didn't have much of a reason to change it up. However, with stress meters, quirks, and afflictions, it would become a necessity. Figuring out how to best utilize your squads would be a huge factor in your success. It would also lead to more interesting character interactions and make the squad feel more like a cohesive unit. Furthermore, dealing with stress and afflictions would lead to having to decide when it is best to abandon a mission. At almost any time in Darkest Dungeon, you can quit a quest, but it comes at the cost of stressing out your party and adding another quirk to their list. In the next Mass Effect game, assuming you are taking the role of a leader, this would have you make decisions that a leader would actually have to make. Do you withdraw from a mission or push forward and risk your party getting injured or even killed? In general, I don't like how most games typically handle failure that affects the narrative. In a lot of games, this type of failure occurs in a cutscene after you've done something successfully. Like in Mass Effect 3 when you beat Kai Lang, the cutscene comes and even though you were able to fight him off, you lose. This sort of thing places distance between gameplay and story. But if Mass Effect lets you fail in the narrative because of a choice made in combat, it would make each phase of the game feel truly connected. A Mass Effect entry like this would be an ambitious and difficult game to make and play, but it would be a rare cohesive experience that really only games can provide. I like the end of Mass Effect 2 because it provides this cohesion to a degree. You have to decide which characters to send on certain tasks depending on their skills and their loyalty. If you make poor decisions, it could lead to squad mates and even Shepard dying. It was a neat concept that brought the two phases closer together, and I'd like to see more of it. Taking some of these ideas from Darkest Dungeon would really breathe new life into the series. There are a few things that I'm not entirely sure how to implement into Mass Effect's formula, primarily permadeath. Not that it couldn't be done, but it would have to be much harder to kill a character because a Mass Effect game can't generate random characters and still have them make a strong impact on the narrative the way Darkest Dungeon can. Also, in Darkest Dungeon, there isn't really a main playable character like Shepard. Assuming the next Mass Effect game has one central character that you play as, it might be weird having missions that potentially don't include that character because he or she is recovering. In general, I'm not sure how quirks and afflictions might need to affect your character differently. A balance would need to be struck so you don't feel too much at odds with the person you are playing as. Overall, implementing concepts from Darkest Dungeon would lead to a much more cohesive and robust Mass Effect game, which I would love to see, but what do you think? Would these changes make Mass Effect too hard? Would there be too much micromanaging? Would you prefer it to be more of a shooter than an RPG? Let me know in the comments. Now I'm gonna go play some more Darkest Dungeon and watch all the characters I love die. That was supposed to be a joke, but then it happened, and it wasn't funny. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. I really enjoyed making this video and I hope that shows. If you liked it, then consider subscribing and checking out my other stuff. This one's about minimaps and this one is about Castlevania. Also, if Darkest Dungeon interested you, then please go buy it. It is in that scary early access stage, but it's fantastic and well worth your money. Anyway, I'm Rasputin. Have a good day. Thank you.